Good morning, guys. Welcome to day 114 until I'm a YouTube millionaire. Today we're going to have a little review of No One Writes Back. There's going to be spoilers in this review, so if you are wanting to read it for yourself, then I recommend you click off of this video unless you don't really care about the spoilers. But either way, yeah. This is an S-tier book. Okay. One of the best books I've ever read. I haven't had a book that had this kind of impact on my psyche since Hatchet, when I was 11 or 12 years old, when I read that book. Honestly, I don't even remember what I read in that book all that time ago. But I cannot give high enough recommendation for this book. Basically, it follows a character who goes around, and this is in South Korea, which, by the way, to the point of it being in South Korea, you could never expect a book like this to come out of, obviously, North Korea. And I think, for that reason alone, it was infinitely important that this book was written to begin with. Make the juxtaposition as black and white, as stark as humanly possible. They live as slaves in North Korea, but in South Korea, such beautiful pieces of art as this come out of it. So the main character is basically an itinerant letter writer. He was a postman for many years of his life, and when he was younger, he had a stutter. He was the middle child of his family. He had two siblings, older brother and a younger sister. And his younger brother was always very capable, and he always lived in his shadow. He's not an idiot himself. He's very smart. He just has a stutter. And his younger sister was a woman who was fascinated with how ugly she looked. She thought she looked ugly. She didn't, but she thought she looked ugly and kept on getting plastic surgery. Well, essentially, what happens is his grandfather has diabetes, and he goes blind because of it, and therefore gets himself a dog. The dog steals the show, by the way. There's a reason we have 15 dogs in this house. Suffice it to say, dogs are amazing. The dog's name is Wajo, but that dog was a guide dog that his grandfather, who went blind, had gotten. And one day, I wanted to talk about this last night, and now it's clearly coming back into mind. So understand that it is much easier for a demon to possess an animal than it is for them to possess a human. If you remember, in the Bible, and they talk about Jesus actually in this book a little bit, when Jesus tells that legion of demons to depart from the human being and go into the swine, what happens is there was an entire legion of demons to try to take control of that human being. And even that legion of demons was not fully capable of doing it because the guy was just going crazy. But the demons leave, they go into the swine, and the swine jump off a cliff, and all of them die. And the human being is healed. Well, this harkens to the situation that led to the main character's grandfather dying. Wajo lost his instincts of being a guide dog at one point, somehow, nobody knows how, and accidentally led his master into a car crash. And his master ended up passing away a little bit afterward from that. After, it was probably a good, I don't remember the time frame, but it was a good month after the car crash. Assuming he got paralyzed, and he told the main character to take Wajo around with him, not to abandon him, and said that it wasn't his fault. He made it very clear, and it wasn't, because Wajo didn't mean to do that. He had no idea what was going on. Doggos are our best friends, but they are much easier to control than a human being is, by demons. Keep that in mind. You can call it whatever you want. If you don't want to call it a demon, fine. Call it an ulterior force whose nature you do not fully comprehend. Fine. But the day the main character, I'm giving some big spoilers here because you don't find this out until almost the end of the book. And when you do find out, it knocks you on your ass. I mean, I will not lie to you that I was struggling to hold back tears. That's how good this book is. I was floored by it. Main character has a seizure problem, in addition to his stutter, and you find out why. And it was so good at putting me in his shoes that I felt like I was on the verge of having a seizure. And I don't have any problems with that. But you find out. The day of his grandfather's burial, his girlfriend, because he's a postman at this time, main character, ends up breaking up with him via a letter. And they're driving to the funeral. The main character just can't handle it. Right? So he asks his father to pull the car over, and he gets out of the car and then takes a taxi and tries to search for his erstwhile girlfriend, but she's already departed the country or something to that effect. And he's just like totally distraught and crying and all that. Well, lo and behold, this is a humongous spoiler I'm giving you. If you want to read the book yourself and be fully impacted by it, don't listen to this part. Don't listen to this video at all. His family gets run down by a drunk driver. Everybody except his eldest brother dies instantly. And his eldest brother held on just long enough to tell him in the hospital, do what you want with your life. And when you find out at the end of the book what happened there, it knocks you on your ass. It knocks you on your ass. This author did it perfectly. But the end of the book, because he writes letters to everybody that he meets on his travels. He meets 751 people. The last person he meets, and this is something that bothered me about the story, he grew an affection for her, and she for him. And it was a romantic relationship that I understand why they didn't bring to quote-unquote completion, because of the tragedy of the main character's life. But I wanted them to. I wanted them to give more info on it, where it went eventually, because she was a novelist, and she wrote a story about his life. Yeah, he meets 751 people on his trip, and at the end of the trip, the first person he met, Wajo, his doggo, he takes home, and he passes away. His doggo's 13 years old, so he's a really elderly feller for doggos. But there was a point in the middle of the book where the main character was going to hang himself in a motel, for obvious reasons, now that you know what happened. And Wajo saves his life. Yanks at his foot, because he's trying to strangle himself with his shoelaces, and yanks him down from the wall where he was trying to hang himself. And then that night, or later on that day, it was actually the next day. Yeah, it was the next day. The main character goes about the city and finds a guy who's about ready to jump off of a bridge, about ready to commit self-deletion himself. Well, he pulls him just in time off of the ledge and saves him. And they end up talking for like a few hours or something. And he tells him the story of his shoelaces, how he was going to unalive himself with his shoelaces. He was going to hang himself. So he requests that they switch shoelaces for one of their shoes. And they do. it goes on that this guy that was going to jump off of this bridge becomes an entrepreneur, very successful, and Wadjo not only saved his master's life, but also saved that guy's life as a result. As well as you could even go to the extension of saying that Wadjo and the main character saved 751 people's lives. So the title of the book, No One Writes Back, is because he writes letters to all these people that he met on his trip. No one ever writes back. Or so he thinks. The end of the book is really good. It's really good. So it turns out that his neighbor had been storing the mail away in her house because his mailbox was getting stuffed to the brim, and she wasn't expecting him to come back anytime soon. So she told the postman for their homes to just deliver the mail to her house until he got back. Well, at the end of the story, he actually was getting letters. He had a whole tub of them. And he opens them up and reads them all night, just bawling, crying tears of joy. And at the end of the story, he says that this is the most sublime moment in his entire life, that it actually did matter. And he has enough material there to write everybody for the rest of his life because there's so much correspondence going on. It's not just a singular letter that they wrote back. Many of them want to continue the correspondence, and if not the majority of them. So his whole family was destroyed by a drunk driver. And that harkens back to don't be selfish with a 3,000-pound missile. Don't drink and drive. So he was the only one left. And I really wanted to see the continuance of his legacy and his family's legacy through a deeper connection with 751, who he never even gives a name. But there was definitely a romantic connection there that they could have done something with. The indication is that it eventually did turn into something after the story ended, which, by the way, it's not a very long story. It's only 200 pages. Very, very easy and a really good read. So this is S tier in my top books that I've ever read in my life. It is incredibly good. I cannot give a high enough recommendation for it, and I can't explain all the ins and outs and the details of it. You have to read it yourself to see exactly what it is I'm talking about. I aspire to write like this person wrote this book. If I can even hold a candle to it in my novels, then I've succeeded as an author. That's how good it is. I was blown away by it. So yeah, there you go, guys. I'm probably going to make a new playlist for this book, because I have to have a playlist of like the top books I've ever read that you guys know. If you don't want to look for anything else, just look at these books. And I do hope that my younger brother, of all the books that he could read, this is one of the most important that he could ever read. I hope he does. That's all I got for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed. No One Writes Back. I didn't say the name because it's hard to say it. John Yun Jin. There you go. Love y'all. Peace.